For the first time in human history, we do have a parallel financial system, a monetary system that we've built open source, distributed, so that you don't have to convince government of anything. You can just opt out and store your time and energy and your effort and your labor. Supporting Bitcoin is pro-technology. It's pro-innovation. It's pro-freedom. I think Bitcoin carries a lot of the American ideals that the country was founded on. This is an open source project that's been around for 15 years and it's surpassing $2 trillion in asset market cap. So is that slow?
What if you could opt out of the traditional financial system entirely? Jack Mallers says Bitcoin isn't just a game changer, it's a lifeline. In this interview, he lays out why Bitcoin could become America's most pro-freedom, pro-innovation, and pro-human financial tool yet. But why are governments still hesitant to adopt it? Stay tuned to discover his bold predictions.
For the first time in human history, we do have a parallel financial system, a monetary system that we've built open source, distributed, so that you don't have to convince government of anything. You can just opt out and store your time and energy and your effort and your labor in something totally independent that's protective of you as a man and your labor and your effort as a human. The facts are Bitcoin's the best performing asset. It's the hardest asset of all time. It's the scarcest asset of all time. And over the last 15 years, if you've parted with Bitcoin, you've been wrong. And so as government, I think it's in our financial interest to own. I think the US government right now is in the business of owning things that are hard, owning things that go up, owning things that can back our future promises and our deficits, and starting to work on our fiscal situation. So it doesn't surprise me that this administration might be dumping. I don't know, is it maybe out of spite? It gives me a lot of comfort that I don't have to convince them of anything. I could use Bitcoin on my own merit, on my own terms. Part of the real groundbreaking innovation is I don't need to go march outside the White House and say, stop dumping stuff. I could just open my phone and hop on the Bitcoin standard myself. But I do think if they are selling Bitcoin, I think it's a monumental mistake that hopefully the next administration corrects, which they claim they will. But no one should be selling Bitcoin. And if you have in the past, you've been wrong, unfortunately. The Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, in my opinion, is one of the biggest economic announcements to come out of the United States of all time. I think it's on par with Nixon in 71. What I think is different is that it's positive. And I really want to hang my hat on that one, in that the US made a really big economic announcement in 1933, but what was it? It was that we're confiscating all your stuff and we're going to really threaten the idea of property rights. They made a really big one in 1971, but what was it? It was we're divorcing ourselves from the gold standard. We're not going to be governed by the laws of Mother Nature and the physical realities of the universe. We're going to be able to print money. They made a really big one in 2008, and what was it? Is we're going to bail out a lot of the mistakes on Wall Street and correct the wrongdoings and not let the free market and the business cycle complete. If we make an announcement in 2025 and lean into Bitcoin, it's not defensive, it's not reactionary, it's progressive, it's positive. To me, supporting Bitcoin is pro-technology, it's pro-innovation, it's pro-freedom. I think Bitcoin carries a lot of the American ideals that the country was founded on. The governments around the world only own 2-3% of the outstanding supply of this asset. So who owns it? The public, the people. So it's an asset that acts in the best interest of the public, that everyone has access to. Satoshi Nakamoto did not go to Goldman Sachs and say, hey, I created a new money, I'd like to take it public. It wasn't uneven fair distribution. He used mining, he used proof of work to make sure that the public and the people have access to this asset. So for all of those reasons, I think the US government supporting this is not only acts in my best interest as a Bitcoiner, and I think acts in their best interest in regards to the deficits. I think it's very pro-American and addresses all of the fundamental issues that all of us Americans are feeling. All of us 30-year-olds are like, Bitcoin's up over 100%, which is a fancy way of saying it's doubled in value, which is an even fancier way of saying my life has gotten half off. So it really hits you in this profound way where you're like, wow, if I own dollars, my life gets more expensive. If my checking account is in Bitcoin, my life not only gets cheaper, but like half off. So like every house, every grocery bill, every gas bill, every vacation is 50% discounted for me. And that's what we're finally rolling out to people. Bitcoin is taxed as capital gain. So you're only paying tax if you have a capital gain, which means if Bitcoin goes up in price since you acquired it, meaning that you can either pay the government a fraction of your capital gain, or you can pay the ultimate tax, which is just being debased by sitting in the currency that they print. And that was an aha moment I had, which is paying a capital gain is a good thing because it means I made money. Now, the fact that I have to share my profit with the government, we can have ethical and philosophical conversations about that all day long, but I'd rather share some of the gain with the government than get debased entirely and watch my wealth and hard work be inflated away.
So far, Jack Mallers has highlighted the power of Bitcoin as the hardest, scarcest asset in history. Unlike the dollar, which loses value over time, Bitcoin's decentralized nature allows individuals to store their wealth in a system free from government control. He argues this is a parallel financial system that protects human effort and labor from being devalued. And if the US government supports Bitcoin, Jack believes it could be one of the greatest economic announcements in history, even more groundbreaking than Nixon's 1971 move off the gold standard. But that's just the beginning. What's Jack's ultimate vision for Bitcoin's role in reshaping America's future? Stick around to hear his closing arguments and how this could impact everyday lives like yours.
Back to the age-old of people that are upset, like, how are we not in hyper-Bitcoinization yet? How is Wall Street not adopted it yet? What's going on? What's wrong? You're like, well, this is an open source project that's been around for 15 years and it's surpassing $2 trillion in asset market cap. So is that slow? So it kind of goes down to that age-old, what's your context? What's your time frame? What are your expectations? And that guides the conversation more so. To me, Wall Street's getting it. But what does getting it mean? Does getting it mean that they all ditch bonds? Well, then no, not yet, but kind of more so than they were 2 years ago. I mean, for me, it's pretty simple. It's that whether you look at domestic debt to GDP, global debt to GDP, there's a hole. That there's a loss that needs to be realized, right? There's an excessive amount of borrowing from our future that has happened here in America and globally, and there's not enough growth to pay it back. And so who's going to realize that loss, right? Like governments have been spending excessively on stuff and overpaying for it. The growth in the production from the spending hasn't computed. And so there is a loss that needs to be marked down and realized somewhere. And the game is like a game of musical chairs. Who's realizing the loss? Is it the collective populace through inflation? Is it the wealthy elites through bonds? Like who's losing? Because if money is time and energy in abstracted form, you can't just like throw it in the trash and erase it from your computer. It's a real loss that has to be realized somewhere. Someone has to lose. And so what I think is happening is those that own treasuries and bonds and these instruments that haven't been performing are starting to wake up to the reality that they might be the losers and they want to de-risk that. So that's my opinion and that's what I see. Like when I see BlackRock selling their IBIT product, that's what I'm reading between the tea leaves is, hey, this is something in your portfolio that is not necessarily correlated to all the other things, that has high upside, that's pro-technology, but a place to almost de-risk yourself from owning these bond things. So just to expand on a few of those, for one, the accretive dilution piece, I still don't think people get that. For the audience, think of it this way. If I were to go out and raise a classic venture capital round, let's say Strike goes out and raises $10 million, and because we're going to launch a new product or we're going to launch in a new market, we're going to hire a bunch of people and do something new, the bet is that I'm taking on dilution by raising the money. I'm owning less of the company. I'm inviting in new shareholders. And the bet is over the hopeful near-term future, I'm able to make that dilution accretive by building something new, launching a new product, doing something interesting that grows the business where the new growth is accretive again. So it's more valuable than the dilution we took on. And that's an active bet that I'd make as the founder by raising a venture capital round and inviting new investors on the cap table, owning less of the company, but making the company more valuable in the future. You know what I think people aren't talking about enough? There's a lot of debate on, are MicroStrategy bonds going to perform like they have in the past? Okay, Bitcoin's valuable, but is it that valuable? Is it 0% valuable? But what I hear not enough conversation is, the age old, if you don't have a problem, don't fix it. But someone's fixing something, right? That's what I don't think is being talked enough about is if they weren't going into MicroStrategy, they'd probably be looking for something else because they clearly aren't happy with the instruments that they've had historically. So unhappy that they're willing to go in at 0%. And so, yes, we can debate how valuable is Bitcoin, what's the future growth of MicroStrategy, but what we're not talking about enough is you have a class of investors that are trying to solve a problem. What problem are they trying to solve? Who are these people? And if you realize that, I think that unlocks a lot of the direction that is most important to understand within the market and less about speculative MicroStrategy predictions. I mean, listen, how do you value a company company that's the best in the world at acquiring and selling financial instruments on the best performing asset of all time. Like, what's that worth? And I think the free market is trying to figure that out. When Saylor does his, BTC yield and his year to date, and he's denominating it all in Bitcoin, but if you take the Bitcoin and you multiply it by the spot price, this guy's talking about driving value to shareholders in, tens of billions of dollars. But if you were to strip away the Bitcoin and the Saylor piece and you were to say there's this operating company that's driving, $10 billion of shareholder value just with the operating company alone, like, what's that worth, right? Like, Coinbase is an $80 billion company. I think its net operating profits is like 2, 3, 4 billion. So Saylor's putting multiples on top of that. So just without the capital base of the Bitcoin. But my point is, listen, no one else is able to sell 150, 200% exposure to Bitcoin in the form of the equity. No one else has a capital base as big as him and a market cap as big as him that's 200% exposed to Bitcoin. And so he's unique in this position, and he's the best in the world at this. And this thing is the best performing asset of all time.
Jack Mallers isn't just describing a new financial system. He's painting a picture of freedom, innovation, and prosperity. Whether it's reducing inflation's grip on your wallet or empowering individuals to control their financial destiny, Bitcoin's potential is undeniable. If this conversation sparked your curiosity, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more game-changing insights. See you in the next one.